Thousands of lies and two betrayals. A story that will shock you. Jack sat in the kitchen, scrolling through the news on his phone. The day was as ordinary as any other. Work, dinner at home, and a quiet evening with his wife. But everything changed when a message popped up on his screen. Your wife is hiding the truth. Her words are lies. He read it several times, as if unable to believe his eyes. Who could have written this? What did it mean? His heart tightened with an unexpected wave of anxiety. From the kitchen, he could see the living room. Lauren sat on the couch, wrapped in her favorite blanket, flipping through a book. She looked as serene and innocent as ever. Her smile was warm, her movements calm. But now, Jack couldn't see it all as perfect anymore. What if everything I believed in is a lie? Thoughts crowded his mind. He tried to recall anything that could hint at her dishonesty, but nothing came to mind. Their life was flawless, a cozy home, stable jobs, evenings together. She was always there for him, supporting him, laughing at his jokes. But the message changed everything. It was like a tiny crack in a window, spreading through his consciousness, threatening to shatter everything he knew. He stood up slowly and approached her. His movements were cautious, almost uncertain. Lauren looked up as he got closer and smiled. "What's wrong? You look tense," she asked calmly, setting her book aside. "Nothing, just a hard day," he replied, slipping his phone into his pocket. Her eyes remained as sincere as ever. Jack felt a pang of guilt for his doubts, but the message kept burning in his mind like an alarm. "Do you want some tea?" Lauren asked, standing up and heading to the kitchen. "Yes, thank you," he replied quietly, watching her. Every movement she made now seemed too smooth, too controlled. Was it his imagination? Or was she really hiding something? Jack pulled out his phone again and reread the message. He hesitated. Should he reply or ignore it? Should he trust it? Finally, his fingers began typing. "Who are you, and why are you saying this?" No response came. Only silence, heavier than any words. "Tea will be ready in a minute," Lauren said, returning from the kitchen. Her voice was calm and confident, but Jack could no longer take her words at face value. Hook. This message was the beginning of the end of our perfect life. But I had no idea how deep the crack would go. Jack's phone vibrated again in his pocket. He pulled it out and saw a new message. "She's with him right now. Want to know where they are?" His hands trembled slightly as he reread the text several times. His pulse quickened, and his mind raced with countless thoughts. Was this a provocation? Should he respond? But something inside compelled him to type a brief reply. Yes. The response came almost immediately. The screen displayed an address to a cafe on the other side of town. Jack glanced at the living room, where Lauren had been calmly sitting just minutes ago, reading her book. She had said she was going to take a shower. But why was she gone so long? Without wasting any time, Jack grabbed his keys and left the house. On the way to the cafe, his mind was flooded with possible scenarios. He tried to calm himself. Maybe it's a mistake. Maybe someone is trying to cause trouble. But the anxiety only grew with every passing minute. When he reached the cafe, his heart was pounding as if it were about to burst out of his chest. He parked the car and cautiously approached the large windows of the establishment. There, behind the glass, he saw her. Lauren was sitting at a table with an unfamiliar man. She was smiling, leaning in closer to him, gesturing animatedly. The man looked at her with admiration, his hand lightly brushing her fingers resting on the table. Something inside Jack tightened. Anger or pain? He couldn't tell. Her smile looked genuine, but not the kind she gave him. It was a smile full of lightness and playfulness he hadn't seen in a long time. He hesitated. Should he go inside or stay outside? His mind told him to gather more evidence, but his heart screamed to intervene immediately. Jack took out his phone and started recording. He needed answers. Jack stood by the window, watching Lauren talk to the stranger. Her laughter, her gestures, it all seemed so natural, yet it was tearing his heart apart. He couldn't hold himself back anymore. He decisively pushed open the cafe door. The chime made a few patrons turn their heads, but he didn't care. Jack slowly approached their table. "Hello, Lauren," he said, keeping his hands in his pockets to hide their trembling. Lauren looked up. Her face showed surprise, quick quickly replaced by a nervous smile. "Oh, Jack, what are you doing here?" Her voice sounded like she was trying to buy time. The man sitting next to her glanced at Jack, tilting his head slightly. His confidence and calmness only fueled the fire. "I could ask you the same," Jack replied, shifting his gaze from Lauren to her companion. "It's just a business meeting," Lauren began, trying to keep her composure. "This is Mark, he's—" "Mark," Jack interrupted. "And what exactly are you working on?" Mark smiled and extended his hand. "We're discussing a joint project. You must be Lauren's husband. Nice to meet you." Jack ignored Mark's hand and turned back to Lauren. "And what project is this, Lauren? Why didn't you mention it at home?" Lauren averted her eyes, her face slightly flushed. "Jack, you're overreacting. It's nothing special. Just work matters. I didn't want to bother you with it." "Didn't want to bother me?" Jack leaned in closer. "And when did you decide I should find out about your work matters like this?" He pulled out his phone and showed her the message. "She's with him right now. Want to know where they are?" Lauren stared at the screen, her expression shifting from shock to confusion. "What is this? Who sent this to you?" Her voice sounded anxious. "That doesn't matter," Jack said, keeping his tone cold. "What matters is that it's true." Mark interjected. "Maybe we shouldn't discuss this here? This isn't the place for such conversations." "And you'd better keep quiet," Jack snapped. Lauren placed her hand on Jack's. "Jack, this isn't what you think. I just needed to discuss some details, that's all." "And these details require dinners and lingering looks?" Jack asked, pulling his hand away. They were silent for a few seconds. Then Jack abruptly stood up. "When you're ready for an honest conversation, I'll be at home." He turned and left, leaving Lauren and her companion in a state of complete disarray. Lauren returned home late that evening. The door closed quietly behind her as she took a deep breath, as if gathering strength before stepping into the living room. Jack was sitting on the couch, arms crossed, his gaze fixed on her. "Are you ready to explain?" he asked coldly, not even attempting to hide his anger. Lauren set down her bag, walked over, and sat across from him. Her eyes were filled with anxiety, but she tried to remain calm. "Jack, I know how this looks, but it's not what you think," she began, trying to sound confident. "Then tell me how it is," Jack replied, leaning forward. "Mark is just a colleague. We're working on a joint project, and we met tonight to discuss some details." "And those details included flirting and touching hands," he interrupted. Lauren turned pale. "That wasn't flirting. I didn't even notice he touched my hand. It didn't mean anything." "But you noticed how you smiled at him, how you leaned closer, how you whispered," Jack said, his voice growing sharper with each word. "Did that not matter either?" "Jack, you're overreacting. I was just being polite." Jack stood up and began pacing the room. "Lauren, I know you well enough to recognize when you're hiding something. And tonight, you were hiding more than just work matters." "Are you serious? Were you spying on me?" she exclaimed, standing up. "I wasn't spying on you. I got a message, and it led me to the cafe. How do you think I should react when I see my wife with another man?" Jack threw his phone onto the table, showing her the message. Lauren grabbed the phone and read the text. Her face was filled with shock. "I don't know who sent this, but it's clearly someone trying to drive us apart," her voice trembled. "I haven't cheated on you, Jack." "Prove it," he replied curtly. Lauren opened her mouth to say something but stopped. Her eyes darted around, searching for the right words to convince him. "I can't prove anything to you if you've already decided not to trust me," she finally said, her voice tinged with sadness. Jack sighed, grabbed his keys, and headed for the door. "Where are you going?" Lauren asked. "To conduct my own investigation," he replied without turning back. Jack decided he could no longer rely on Lauren's words. The uncertainty that had been gnawing at him for days was becoming unbearable. He picked up his phone and dialed the number of his old friend Michael, who worked as a private investigator. "Mike, I need your help," Jack said, trying to sound calm. "Something serious?" Michael asked. "I want to know the truth about my wife." Michael didn't ask unnecessary questions and took the case. For several days, Jack waited for updates. Each evening, he sat at home, trying not to reveal his doubts, observing Lauren. She acted as she always did, smiling, cooking dinner, asking about his day. But now, in every gesture, every word, he saw something hidden. Michael sent regular reports. The first few days revealed nothing suspicious. Routine trips to the office, meetings with clients. But on the third day, Michael sent a photo that made Jack's heart stop. In the photo, Lauren and Mark were sitting together at a restaurant. They were laughing, and Mark was holding her hand. "This is just the beginning," Michael wrote. "Give me a little more time." On the fifth day, Michael sent a new series of photos. In them, Lauren and Mark were leaving an office and getting into his car. The next few shots showed them entering a hotel. Jack sat in his car, staring at the photos, when Michael called. "I think you should see this for yourself," Michael said. "They're still there." Jack decided to go. He arrived at the hotel and saw Mark's car parked near the entrance. Jack hesitated. Should he go inside? His mind screamed for caution, but his heart demanded immediate action. When Lauren came home that evening, Jack was waiting for her in the living room. The photographs lay on the table in front of him. "What is this?" he asked as she walked in. Lauren stopped in her tracks, her face paling as she saw the photos. "Jack, this isn't what you think," she began, but her voice trembled. "Then tell me what it is." "The hotel. Mark, is all this just a coincidence?" "It was a meeting with a client," she said, but her eyes avoided his gaze. "A meeting with a client at a hotel? A client who holds your hand?" Jack couldn't hide the sarcasm in his voice. Lauren fell silent. Her silence was louder than any words she could have spoken. Jack sat in the living room, staring at the photos that confirmed his suspicions. His heart pounded in his chest, but his cold logic kept him outwardly composed. Lauren entered the room, her steps hesitant. She knew a difficult conversation awaited her. "Jack, what is this?" she asked, seeing the photos laid out on the table. "These are my questions, Lauren," he replied without even looking at her. "And I hope to get some answers." Lauren stepped closer but didn't sit down. She looked confused, almost guilty. "This isn't what you think." "Not what I think." Jack raised his head, his voice trembling with restrained anger. "Then explain to me why my wife is sitting in a restaurant with another man and then going to a hotel with him." Lauren was silent for a few seconds before sighing and sitting down across from him. "Fine, I'll tell the truth." Lauren began speaking in a quiet voice, avoiding direct eye contact with Jack. "It happened when you were always at work. We hardly saw each other. I felt like I had become routine to you, unimportant." "And that's your excuse?" Jack interrupted, clenching his fists. "No," she replied, "but it's an explanation. I met Mark at work. At first, it was just conversations, discussions about projects. He was attentive, he listened to me. And then, it went further than it should have." Jack picked up the photo of Mark holding her hand. Is this further than it should have gone?" Lauren began to cry, but she kept talking. "Yes, we met. But it's over now, Jack. I realized I made a mistake. I don't want to lose you." Lauren, trying to make amends, got up from her chair and approached Jack. She reached out to touch his face, but he pulled away. "Jack, please," she whispered, her voice almost breaking. "I love you." She leaned closer, trying to kiss him. Her touch was tender, but Jack remained unmoved. "Lauren, do you really think this will fix everything?" His voice was cold, but his eyes betrayed how her closeness affected him. Lauren tried to use her passion as a last attempt to reconnect with Jack. Their intimacy grew more intense, but it didn't bring relief. Afterward, Jack still pulled away. "This doesn't change anything," he said, putting on his shirt and leaving the room. Jack went to the bedroom, packed a few things into a bag, and headed for the door. "Where are you going?" Lauren shouted. "I need to think. I don't know how to live with this lie," he replied without looking back. Lauren stood in the hallway, her face filled with despair. Jack checked into a small hotel on the outskirts of town. He sat in the dimly lit room, consumed by mixed emotions. Lauren's painful betrayal, her explanations, her tears, and her desperation still swirled in his mind. He walked to the window, staring into the night, searching for an answer to the question, "Can I forgive her?" Suddenly, There was a knock at the door. "Who is it?" Jack asked, hoping it was just room service. "It's me, Lauren." Her voice came through the door. Jack froze. His heart tightened with anger and pain. He didn't want to see her, but at the same time, he felt she had something more to say. "Go home, Lauren. I told you I need to be alone," he said without approaching the door. "Please, Jack, let me in. It's important." Her voice was quiet and trembling. Jack sighed and opened the door. Lauren stood in the hallway, her eyes red from crying, holding a small bag in her hands. "What do you want?" he asked, trying to maintain a cold tone. "I want to fix this," she replied, stepping into the room. Lauren walked up to Jack and placed a hand on his shoulder. "I know I've destroyed your trust, and I'm sorry. But please, let me try to make it right," she said, looking straight into his eyes. Jack stepped back a few paces, sighing. "And how do you plan to fix it? Words won't change anything here." Lauren moved closer to him, placing her hands on his face. Her touch was warm, and Jack felt his inner resistance beginning to weaken. "I want to show you how much you mean to me," she whispered, leaning toward his lips. Jack hesitated but didn't pull away. Their kiss was a mixture of pain and passion. Lauren tried to regain his trust through their closeness, her movements careful yet persistent. They spent the night together, charged with intense emotions. Lauren appeared genuine, vulnerable, trying to demonstrate her love and devotion. But even in the most intimate moments, Jack couldn't shake off the memories of what he had seen and heard. Jack woke up early. Lauren was still asleep beside him, her face serene and almost innocent. He watched her for a few minutes, trying to decide whether he could trust her again. When she woke, her first words were, "Thank you for giving me this chance, Jack." But his response was cold. "Lauren, this changes nothing." She looked at him, her eyes welling up with tears again. "But we spent the night together. I thought that meant—" "That was just a moment of weakness. I still can't forget what you did," he said, standing up and gathering his belongings. Lauren sat silently, watching him as he prepared to leave. "Where are you going?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I need to be alone to figure out what to do next," he replied, not turning back. Jack closed the door behind him, leaving Lauren in the empty room. Returning home, Jack returned home after spending the night away from Lauren. The front door was locked, but the house was silent. There were no signs that Lauren had come home. A sense of unease crept into his heart. On the kitchen table, he saw an envelope with his name on it. Jack slowly tore it open and began to read the letter written in her familiar handwriting. Lauren's letter. Jack, I know I've broken our trust. You're right. What we had isn't the same anymore. But please believe me, everything I've done was to protect us. I can't keep living under this strain, knowing that you no longer trust me. That's why I've decided to leave. I need to resolve what I started and stop Mark before it's too late. I love you and always will. Maybe one day, we'll find our way back to each other. Lauren. Jack sat for a long time, staring at the letter. Anger, pain, and disappointment swirled within him, mingling with an unexpected fear for her safety. The following days were a living nightmare for Jack. He tried to find Lauren, calling her repeatedly, but her phone was turned off. He even reached out to Michael, who had previously tracked her, but there was no trace of Lauren. On the third day, Jack received a call. An unfamiliar voice said, "If you want to know where your wife is, come to the cafe on 8th Street. Come alone." Without hesitation, Jack went to the meeting. At the cafe, he was met by a man who introduced himself as Eric, a former colleague of Mark. "Lauren got herself involved in a very dangerous situation," Eric began. "Mark is using her to cover up his schemes. She was trying to find incriminating evidence against him, but it's a risky game." Jack learned that Mark was involved in financial crimes and that Lauren had been gathering information to expose him. Her meetings with Mark had been part of her plan, but now she was in danger. A few days later, when Jack had almost lost hope, Lauren suddenly came home. She looked exhausted, her clothes in disarray, but her demeanor was calm. "You're alive," Jack said, looking at her with a mix of surprise and relief. "I did what I had to do," she replied. "Mark won't be able to hurt us anymore." Jack stood up and approached her, his eyes filled with conflicting emotions. "What did you do, Lauren?" She didn't answer, lowering her gaze. Lauren sat on the couch in the living room, her face weary but resolute. Jack stood by the window, his back turned to her. The room was silent except for the sound of rain tapping against the window pane. "I want to know the whole truth, Lauren," Jack finally said, his voice calm but firm. Lauren took a deep breath. "Fine. You deserve to know." Lauren began to speak, her voice quiet but laden with emotion. "When I first started meeting with Mark, I didn't even know what I was getting myself into. He worked for a company that, on the surface, appeared legitimate. But over time, I found out they were using falsified financial documents to deceive their partners. And you decided that had nothing to do with you?" Jack interrupted, his gaze heavy. "No, I tried to step away. But then Mark found something to use against me. Something I did before we even met. He used it to pull me back in." Jack crossed his arms over his chest. "What was it, Lauren?" She lowered her eyes. "I signed some documents that helped them obtain illegal funds. I thought it was just a standard business deal, but now I see it made me complicit." Jack stepped closer, his voice growing harsher. "And how does this involve us?" Lauren looked him straight in the eyes. "Mark threatened to expose everything if I didn't help him, but I decided not to play by his rules. I started gathering evidence to bring him down." "But there's something else, Jack," Lauren said, her voice trembling. "He knows about our friends and colleagues. He said that if I don't stop what I'm doing, he'll use them to get what he wants. So because of you, other people are in danger now?" Jack was shocked. "I tried to protect them," Lauren replied, "but I need your help. I can't do this alone anymore." Jack was silent for a long time, processing her words. His trust in her was shattered, but he understood they were facing a serious threat. "What are you suggesting?" he finally asked. "Mark made a mistake," Lauren said. "I have copies of documents that can expose him, but I can't take them to the police myself. He'll know it was me. And you want me to get involved?" Jack looked irritated. "We can do this together. If we plan it right, Mark won't be able to threaten us or anyone else anymore." Jack sighed. "Fine. But if you hide anything from me again, I won't protect you." Jack woke up early. The room was silent. He reached for the other side of the bed, but Lauren was already gone. His heart sank. Lauren always stayed longer, even on the hardest days. He got up to look for her, but instead of her, he found a piece of paper on the kitchen table. Asterisk, "Jack, I know I've broken your trust. You've given me chances to make things right, but I've only made things worse. I've realized your life would be better without me. You deserve peace, freedom from my mistakes. But before I leave, I want you to know, I love you. I always have. Whatever you hear next, don't try to find me. This is my path, my guilt, and my fight. I'll do everything I can to ensure you and those I put at risk are safe. Forgive me for all I've done and for not being the person you wanted me to be. With love, Lauren." Asterisk. Jack felt the blood drain from his face. He couldn't believe she was gone. Too many questions were left unanswered. He tried calling her, but her phone was off. All her social media accounts were gone, her bank accounts emptied, as if she had erased her existence. Desperate, Jack turned to Michael, his detective friend, for help finding any traces of Lauren. After a few days, Michael returned with news. She met with Mark the night she disappeared. After that, they both left the city. "But I found an interesting lead," Michael said, showing him a surveillance photo. The image showed Lauren handing Mark a folder of documents. Jack realized Lauren had given Mark the evidence that could incriminate him. She had likely left to protect others, sacrificing herself. Jack decided to find Mark. It was a risky plan, but he couldn't sit idly by knowing Lauren might have put herself in danger. After days of searching, Jack confronted Mark at a small diner outside the city. "What have you done to Lauren?" Jack asked bluntly. Mark smiled. "She did everything to save you, Jack. She gave me the documents and left. Now you and everyone else are safe. But as for her, she's staying where you won't find her." Jack returned home, but nothing felt the same. He opened a drawer and pulled out a photo of him and Lauren, smiling happily on a beach. Her sacrifice was noble but agonizing. She had done everything to protect him, even if it meant leaving him forever. He sat in silence, staring at her photo, whispering, "I love you, Lauren." After weeks of fruitless searching, Jack began to lose hope. Lauren was gone, and even Michael, the skilled detective, couldn't find any more clues. One evening, Jack received an anonymous message. "Looking for Lauren? Start with Mark. He hasn't stopped." Jack reread the message carefully, his body filled with anger and anxiety. He realized that Mark was still manipulating the situation and might still have Lauren under his control. Jack decided to act on his own. He reached out to everyone he knew who might have information about Mark, gathering details about his business and connections. It turned out that Mark was still active, manipulating, forging documents, and blackmailing. Jack realized that Mark wasn't just destroying Lauren. He was using her as a tool in his schemes. Jack discovered Mark's favorite hangout spot, a high-end restaurant in the city center. He decided to confront him face to face. When Jack entered the restaurant, Mark was seated at a corner table, surrounded by a few people. He looked relaxed and confident. "We need to talk," Jack said, approaching him. Mark looked up and smiled. "Jack, I knew you'd find me. But tell me, what is there for us to talk about?" "Lauren," Jack replied, his voice filled with anger. Mark just laughed. "Lauren? She made her choice, Jack. You'd better let it go." "Where is she?" Jack raised his voice. Mark leaned forward. "Far away from you. And you'd better not interfere, or you'll regret it." After this encounter, Jack realized that talking wouldn't solve anything. He decided to find real evidence that could expose Mark and reveal Lauren's whereabouts. A few days later, Jack located Mark's safe in his office. Using duplicate keys provided by Michael, Jack opened the safe and found documents revealing Mark's financial crimes. But what caught Jack's attention most was a note with a name and an address. The address was in a small, remote town. Jack drove to the address but found no one there. The house appeared abandoned. However, in one of the rooms, he found a woman's scarf that belonged to Lauren. It confirmed that she had been there recently. On a table, Jack discovered a note written in uneven handwriting. "Jack, if you're here, know that I'm trying to end this. Stay out of it. I don't want you to get hurt." Jack realized Lauren was still alive but in danger. Jack understood that a direct confrontation with Mark wouldn't work. His previous attempts to find Lauren or force Mark to tell the truth had failed. So, he decided to play smarter. Jack knew that if he appeared weak, Mark might lower his guard. Jack arranged a meeting with Mark at the same restaurant where they had first spoken. This time, his tone was different, calm and almost submissive. "You look better than last time, Jack," Mark said with a smirk as Jack sat down. "I've come to offer you a deal," Jack replied, ignoring the mockery. "A deal?" Mark leaned forward with interest. "And what could you possibly offer me?" "I'll stop looking for Lauren. You've won. I'm no longer interested in where she is or what happened to her," Jack said, his voice steady. Mark raised an eyebrow. "Why the sudden change?" "I've realized you're always one step ahead, but I need to close this chapter of my life. I just want to know if she's alive." Mark studied him carefully, as if weighing the sincerity of his words. "Fine. If you really stop your search, I'll tell you what you want to know." Jack played his role flawlessly. He pretended to have given up while subtly probing for Mark's weaknesses. Feeling superior, Mark let his guard down and revealed more than he should have. "Lauren did her part," Mark said. "Now she's far away, and you won't find her. But if you want to confirm she's alive here," Mark handed Jack a flash drive. "This contains footage of her last task. But be careful, don't dig too deep." Jack returned home and immediately reviewed the contents of the flash drive. It contained videos and documents showing Lauren handing over information to the police, trying to expose Mark. But it also revealed her last known location, a small warehouse outside the city. Jack knew it was a trap, but he decided to take the risk. Jack arrived at the warehouse late at night. The place was abandoned, but inside, he found a room filled with documents that could expose not only Mark but his entire network. Suddenly, the door behind him slammed shut. Mark stepped out of the shadows, smiling. "I warned you, Jack. You couldn't just walk away. You're too predictable." "Where's Lauren?" Jack asked, trying to remain calm. "You'll find out, but not today," Mark replied. Jack sat in a dark office, poring over the printed documents from the flash drive Mark had given him. The deeper he delved into the files, the more he realized how far-reaching Mark's schemes were. But among the financial records, logs, and photos, something caught Jack's eye. A photograph of Lauren. She was standing next to Mark and two unfamiliar men. In the photo, Lauren looked uneasy but tried to hide it. On the back of the photo, there was a handwritten note. "It's all set. She's in the game." Determined, Jack followed an address he found in the documents. It led to an abandoned warehouse outside the city. The night was quiet, with only the wind whistling between the old buildings. He entered the warehouse through a broken door. Inside, it was dark, but there were fresh drinks and leftovers on a table, evidence of recent activity. On the table, Jack found another envelope containing more papers. Among them were records proving Lauren's involvement in Mark's financial schemes. However, there was also a recording of a conversation between Lauren and Mark. On the audio, Jack heard Mark's voice. "You realize everything falls apart without your involvement? You need to play your part." Lauren's voice was quiet, but filled with noticeable fear. "I'll do as you say, but if you threaten Jack again, I'll expose you myself." Mark laughed. "Oh, Lauren, you're already in too deep. If you expose me, you'll go down with me. You chose this path." Jack stopped the recording, his heart racing. He realized Lauren had been forced to work with Mark, but had also been trying to protect him. Among the documents, Jack found a list of accounts tied to international banks. He realized Mark had used Lauren not just as an accomplice but as a cover. Her name was on documents that could make her the primary suspect. Jack hesitated. Could he trust Lauren, even if he found her? She had made a deal with Mark, even if it was under duress. But had she also worked against him? As Jack prepared to leave the warehouse, he heard footsteps. He hid behind a door and watched as Lauren entered the warehouse. She looked around, as if ensuring no one was there. Jack stepped forward, and she froze when she saw him. "Jack? What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I could ask you the same," he replied coldly. "Lauren, what are you hiding?" She turned away, but Jack stepped closer. "I know you worked with Mark, but have you been honest with me?" Lauren tried to explain. "Mark forced me. I did it to protect you, but I'm still trying to find a way to stop him. Are you lying to me now, or were you lying then?" Jack asked, his voice filled with anger and pain. Lauren stayed silent. Her eyes filled with tears, but she couldn't find the words to convince him. Jack stood in the middle of the warehouse, staring at Lauren as she desperately tried to explain her actions. Her words were filled with anguish, but he couldn't believe her anymore. Every word she spoke sounded like another lie. "Jack, I did this to protect you," she said, trying to move closer to him. "Protect me?" Jack's voice was cold, almost venomous. "You put me in danger with your actions. You worked with Mark and hid it from me. How can I trust you?" Lauren reached out to touch his hand, but he pulled away. "I didn't have a choice," her voice trembled. "He blackmailed me. If I didn't follow his orders, you would have been hurt." Jack stared at her, his eyes blazing with anger and disappointment. "You had a choice, Lauren. You could have come to me, told me the truth, but you chose to act alone and dragged us both into this mess. I didn't want to involve you," she whispered. "You already have," Jack said, turning away. Jack walked to the warehouse door, his hand hesitating on the handle. He turned back to look at Lauren one last time. "I can't do this anymore, Lauren. I can't trust you." "Jack, please don't go," she begged, tears streaming down her face. "I'll find Mark and expose him myself. But you're no longer a part of my life," he said coldly and resolutely. He stepped out of the building, leaving Lauren behind. Her cry of "Jack" shattered the silence of the warehouse, but he didn't turn back. Jack returned home and threw himself into compiling all the evidence he had against Mark. He decided to act alone, regardless of the risks. He contacted his friend Michael and told him everything he had uncovered. "Mark can't remain free," Jack said. "I'm going to turn this over to the police, but I need more evidence to link him to all these schemes." "It's dangerous, Jack," Michael replied, "but if you're sure you can handle it, I'll help." Jack came home after breaking things off with Lauren. His heart was heavy, but he convinced himself he had made the right decision. Immersing himself in the evidence, he tried not to think about her tears and pleas. But the memories haunted him. In the dark of night, Jack often recalled her voice and the moments when they were happy together. He couldn't help but wonder, could he have done something differently? Michael sent Jack new materials that confirmed Mark was continuing his illegal activities. One folder included a financial report listing Lauren as the main contact. This raised even more concerns for Jack. He realized that even after their separation, Lauren was still entangled in Mark's affairs. One evening, Jack received an anonymous call. The voice on the other end sounded nervous and hurried. "Are you Jack? I know where Lauren is. She's trying to stop Mark, but she's in danger." "Who is this?" Jack asked, trying to stay calm. "You don't have much time. She's in the warehouse district on the northern outskirts. If you want to see her alive, hurry." The call disconnected. Jack immediately set out for the given location. His heart pounded as his mind raced with doubts. Was this a trap? Was Lauren really there? When he arrived, he found an empty warehouse with dim lighting. Inside, he discovered her belongings, her phone, scarf, and a small notebook containing notes about Mark. But Lauren herself was nowhere to be found. Jack noticed fresh footprints on the dusty floor leading to the back exit. As he stepped outside, he heard the sound of a car speeding away. He ran after it, but the vehicle disappeared into the night. In the notebook Lauren left behind, Jack found her final thoughts. "If you're reading this, it means I'm no longer able to protect you. Jack, forgive me. Keep fighting. You're stronger than you think. Lauren." This event pushed Jack to take decisive action. He resolved to expose Mark at any cost, though the looming fear of losing Lauren forever haunted him, making him question whether he could save her in time. Weeks had passed since Lauren's disappearance, but Jack still couldn't find peace. Her letter lay on the nightstand by his bed, every word etched into his consciousness. He read it over and over, hoping to find something that could lead him to answers. One evening, when he began to think he would never uncover the truth, his phone rang. It was Michael. "Jack, I found something," he said. Jack met Michael in his office, where he handed over documents and photos he had uncovered. "Lauren handed all the incriminating documents to Mark," Michael explained. "She tried to negotiate, but Mark framed her. All the evidence points to her being forced to take the blame." Among the papers was a copy of a letter Lauren had left for the police. In it, she confessed to all the crimes that were, in reality, orchestrated by Mark. "Are these her words?" Jack asked, clutching the letter. "Yes, she did it to save you and others," Michael replied. "But there's more. They found her body outside the city." Those words hit Jack like a knife. He froze, then slowly sat down. How did it happen? The police believe it was a contract killing, but there's no trace of who ordered it. It looks like she became a victim of her own choices. Jack returned home, unable to remember how he got there. His body and soul felt empty. Sitting in the dark, he held a photo of Lauren taken years ago. Her smile was so happy, so genuine. He tried to make sense of how it had come to this. Her sacrifice was noble, but it didn't change the fact that he had lost her forever. The next morning, Jack reviewed all the documents Michael had given him. He realized Mark was still free and remained a threat to others. "If she sacrificed herself for me, I can't let it be in vain," Jack said, staring at his reflection in the mirror. He decided to hand over all the evidence Lauren had collected to the police, but it wasn't enough. Jack began formulating his own plan to expose Mark. How far are you willing to go for the one you love, even when you know the truth might destroy you?